If you haven't seen the individual reviews for the boards that I'm talking about in this video, I highly recommend you take a look at those first so that you see what each board has to offer, and of course if you agree with me or not, but otherwise feel free to stick around for this what should be an interesting comparison. So the main three boards I want to talk about are MSI's Gaming M7, Gigabyte's Aorus Gaming 7, and Asus's Maximus 9 Hero. To make it clear, I haven't actually had my hands on the Hero, I've had my hands on the Code board, which is the one up from it, and the Strix 270F, which is a couple below, and they're very similar in terms of features. Of course they are Z270 motherboards after all, and the BIOS, which is obviously one of the main features and the first thing I'm going to talk about, is very similar across the suite of boards. For me, the best BIOS that you can get on these motherboards can be found on MSI's board. It's fantastic, it's very easy to use in both easy and advanced mode. I love that the boot priority is just a string of icons that you can drag around, and the board explorer feature is absolutely brilliant. Asus's BIOS is actually really nice as well. I do recommend it if you are planning on overclocking. It's a very nicely laid out set, and it's also fairly easy to use, although not quite as nice as MSI's offering. Finally, Gigabyte's BIOS is very nice. It was the easiest for me to overclock on, although they do bury a couple of settings in submenus, especially if you just want to change the multiplier and the core voltage, but otherwise it's a very easy to use BIOS. It's still quite nicely laid out, although again not quite as good as MSI's. On the overclocking front, I feel like all of the boards are pretty well matched when it comes to just getting a couple hundred megahertz extra from your chip, but I think for me MSI does this just a little bit better than most people, just because they have the game boost down the bottom, which means you can turn it all the way up to 11 if you like and run at 5.2 gigahertz, and the 7700K is well over the safe maximum voltage, but it is very easy to do. Of course, if you just want a couple extra 100 megahertz, turning the dial just up a couple of notches is a very nice way to get that. It's very simple and it's very stable as well, which I'm really impressed with. I'm happy to say though that the other boards do have overclocking profiles built into them, so you can run those profiles, and in theory they will be just as stable as the MSI board. It's just not quite as simple, as you do have to go into the BIOS of that one, whereas MSI's game boost dial is literally just a dial you turn. So there is a little bit of a difference there, but if you want super easy overclocking, go for the MSI board. If you want world record breaking overclocks, then apparently the MSI board is the one for you too, but Gigabyte and Asus do have very nice offerings here, and they're certainly not lacking massively in overclocking in that aspect. In terms of aesthetics, this is one of the main reasons why a lot of people buy motherboards, and for me they're all very nice. I think personally I have a slight preference towards either the MSI board or the Gigabyte board. I think MSI does the RGB LED stuff just a little bit more tastefully than everyone else. I think on the Asus boards they're just a little bit too un-RGB for a lot of people, which is an interesting thing to say because I know a lot of people hate it and a lot of people love it, so I'd love to hear what you think in the comments down below. But yeah, I think Gigabyte's board is actually really nice. They've got a lot of LEDs on there, so if you want a very bright, very white looking system, then that might be a board for you. In terms of I/O, they're all fairly similar. Obviously Gigabyte has their dual gigabit Ethernet, although to make it clear they are two different NICs, which means you can't team them. You will just have to have two separate connections there, but it is still nice to have as an option if you do have that option in say a switch that you have. And of course if you're just running with single gigabit Ethernet, then they're all for fairly good options. None of them have Wi-Fi, just to make it clear as well. And the other thing to mention is that both the MSI and the Asus boards have the USB 3.1 Gen 2 front panel header, so you can get your full 10 gigabit per second through front panel ports once cases start sort of accepting that as an option. And to make it clear, Level 1 Techs did a great video on explaining the differences between USB 3, USB 3.1, USB 3.1 Gen 1, Gen 2, so I will leave a link to that one in the description as well if you want to check that out and get a better understanding of what all that sort of stuff means. On storage configurations, I think MSI has this one slightly in the bag with their M.2 Shield. It is quite nice. It's not necessarily, well, necessary, but having that as an option, especially because the NVMe drives can get a little bit toasty, it's a nice option. And of course having both the triple M.2 slots and the U.2 port available to you is quite a nice option, although they all do have M.2 slots, I believe at least 2 of them per board, so that's a pretty nice option. In terms of graphics card configurations, they can all generally do 2 or 3-way SLI, which again, if you're running this sort of board, you're likely not going to be trying to run your 4-way SLI. Not that that's even really a thing anymore. In fact, 3-way SLI is kind of dying too, so if you want to run a couple of graphics cards, these boards are perfectly fine. One of the problems with making this sort of comparison is that a lot of the features are very similar and very standard across the board. There aren't too many unique features that are available. Of course, stuff like MSI's Game Boost is nice. They all have some sort of smart fan control system, although Asus and Gigabyte's offerings are actually really, properly awesome right now, so that's awesome. And of course they have LED headers and that sort of thing. I think Gigabyte pips the post with the LED headers because they have RGBW, so for the full white, and they can also be reprogrammed, so you don't need Aura LED strips or anything like that. So that's quite nice as well. But yeah, the features are generally, you know, they all have RGB lighting on the boards, they're just named differently. They all are pretty great. Overclocking, aesthetically, it's mostly up to you. I think personally, pips the post is probably the MSI board. As I said, storage is very, very similar. I think MSI, again, pips the post just slightly on this one. And overclocking, as I said, they're all pretty great. So it's a very close race in this one. As I said, all the features are very similar. So if you're looking for a motherboard, you kind of can't go too wrong with any of them. And it's mostly just up to brand preference. One thing to mention, of course, is that if you're in the UK, Gigabyte are actually a nice shout because they are the only people in the UK to have an RMA centre in the UK. It's in Milton Keynes. I've been to it several times, and they're very nice guys as well, so that's, you know, quite cool. But otherwise, as I said, all the boards are very nice. They all have very nice features, so as I said, you can't really go too wrong with it. So I guess that kind of wraps it up. If you want to buy any of these motherboards, I've left links to Overclockers UK and a worldwide Amazon link down there for them too, so feel free to check that out. It does help me out if you use those. It supports the channel, keeps me making videos and all that sort of stuff, so it'd be awesome if you could use them. And of course, if you're buying anything else, there are general Overclockers UK and Amazon links in the description down below that would help me out. And otherwise, yeah, I guess that's kind of that really. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more motherboard comparisons and general other videos, then feel free to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Let me know what your favorite board is out of these or anything else. And of course, feel free to check out the Code and Strix board reviews that are also linked in the description too. And otherwise, I guess that's kind of it. So thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you all in the next one.